Welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay, and if you're joining us watching this online, we apologise for the lack of streaming, but we're posting this video afterwards. So I'd like to welcome you to today's panel discussion on how the government's proposal to revoke the residence permits of immigrants who've been unemployed for 3 months, as well as the use of automated decision-making by the Finnish Immigration Service, will affect immigrants and also how it will affect Finnish society. My name's Nick Waters and I'm a co-founder and the chair of Helsinki Left. I've been asked to say a few words about the topic and also to introduce myself and Helsinki Left, which has been supporting our friend Nitin Soni in organising today's event. Thanks to Nitin for taking the initiative to follow up on the panel we co-organised together a year ago, a day before the important public hearing on this topic organised by the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment. Helsinki Left is an immigrant-led grassroots non-profit organisation and a chapter of the political party Left Alliance. It was founded just over a year ago in order to better represent and integrate immigrants into Finnish politics by working in English language. We're a really active chapter with a couple of events each month. The thing that sets us apart from other parties is that this came from us creating a space for immigrants ourselves within the Left Alliance and encouraging the party to make it easier for immigrants to participate in politics. We know the challenges faced by immigrants and we help the party to understand these issues and better address them. And some other parties have spaces for immigrants, but they tend to be organised in a more top-down way by Finnish members of the parties in order to try to get the immigrant vote, but not always necessarily understanding the issues that immigrants face. The Left Alliance has been extremely supportive of our cause and listens carefully to our concerns. I have a few opinions I'd like to share about the proposed regressive reforms. Firstly, they're not just economically but also socially illiterate. All credible sources evidence that Finland has a declining birth rate and needs immigrants to support social welfare within its ageing society. Immigrants bring skills to all kinds of sectors, from care work and nursing through to academia and technological development. Immigrants are needed for the economy, and the proposed law, which accompanies severe attacks on all workers and their rights, will weaken the economy. Today, the Technology Industry Employers Association came out and criticised the proposals. But beyond that, immigrants shouldn't only be treated as economic assets, since they also contribute to society by enriching it in other ways and by becoming parts of our communities, at least when we welcome them. Second, as I'm sure Nitin will explain, it's well documented that the use of AI and other forms of automated decision-making can and often does have inbuilt biases. Even with the best intentions by Migri, these potential biases could result in different treatment of individuals based on their identity, contravening the Constitution of Finland and the Non-Discrimination Act. Third, the reforms seek to divide us both economically and socially. They have two distinct purposes coming from different parties with different motives. One comes from the desire of the far-right Finns party to use populist lies that blame immigrants for all of Finland's problems which have been created by austerity politics. The other comes from the desire of the economically right-wing parties led by the National Coalition Party and supported by all of the other government parties to further our already multi-tiered immigration system into even more distinct tiers. The most essential workers for the survival of the welfare state tend to be underpaid and overexploited, especially immigrants in those sectors. Those with white-collar jobs tend to be better paid and treated. The 3-month rule seeks to create wider divisions within this system. The more divided society is into different groupings, the easier it is for the government to counter any resistance to their policies. And that leads me nicely to my final point. Since the government programme was announced, we've been advocating for solidarity among different groups of immigrants. It was great to see other groups form and to mobilise in opposition to the proposals, and we've cooperated with them. But some of their work, as we've been warning, has been I would say, highly counterproductive to this aim of solidarity. So they may be protecting their own interests and seeking further concessions to so-called skilled immigrants, highly skilled immigrants. The government's listened to these people and modified its proposals to give white-collar immigrants special treatment because it's more concerned with its crude measure of measuring the strength of the economy than with the well-being of the welfare state and the public at large. But there's still a chance to influence legislative change, especially with this hearing tomorrow. Our best hope is perhaps to influence the civil servants drafting the legislation who have to base their work on evidence rather than wasting energy on challenging the government's ideologically motivated proposals. Getting representation for immigrants means fielding candidates in elections and trying to get them elected to office. Helsinki Left's membership has nominated 3 candidates for the 2025 municipal election, of whom I'm one, and my candidacy has been approved, and the other 2 are under consideration by the district parties, Helsinki and Espoo. I'll be launching my campaign in November and organising a series of events to which I'd love to welcome you to come and express your opinions on various issues about how we can build a happier Helsinki. Behind me you can see my 4 main themes, and I'll be elaborating on those over the coming months. Regardless of your background, if you want to see immigrants in decision-making positions, vote for them. This is how gender equality was furthered, and now it's time to get rid of the underrepresentation of immigrants in politics. You can keep informed about my campaign as it develops over the coming months by following @nickw.fi on Instagram and Facebook, and you can keep up to date with the chapter's activities by following @Helsinki Left. If you support us, you can join the chapter and via our website, and you can help support our running costs by buying merchandise. So you don't need to be a resident of Helsinki to join the chapter. You can join with any Finnish address. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and now I would like to hand over to Toivo Haimi, who is a journalist at the Left Alliance's newspaper, KU, who is going to introduce our excellent speakers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nick. Right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Toivo Haimi. I'm a journalist, and I work as a political correspondent for Kansan Uutiset, or KU magazine, and I'll be moderating tonight's panel. So greetings and welcome to each and every one of us here at Tekstin Talo, and everyone watching the recording later. Our panel tonight will be about immigration reforms of the Finnish government, the 3-month rule concerning immigrant unemployment, and automated decision-making, or ADM for short, in the Finnish immigration service, Migri. So lots of really interesting and important topics to cover. And with us tonight are our expert panelists. So please welcome Mr. Jarmo Tiukkanen, who is a senior advisor and a civil servant at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment of Finland. So that's TEM. You can already have a seat. Yeah. Mr. Youssef, who is the chief economist of the Finnish startup community. Dr. Kuivin Ndomo, who is a university teacher and a researcher at the University of Jyväskylä. Dr. Nitin Soni, who is a professor of practice and a researcher of responsible AI at Aalto University. And Mrs. Sofia Akame-Räisänen, who is the project coordinator of the non-profit Think Africa. And Mr. Dietmar Hasanai, who is the vice chair and co-founder of Helsinki Left, one of the organisers of tonight's event. Great, so the structure of tonight's event is as follows. We'll first have a presentation about the immigration policy of the Finnish government, so we'll know what we're all talking about. And then we'll have a moderated panel discussion by ourselves with the panel. And after that, you, the audience, will have an opportunity to offer your questions to the panelists. So if you have any questions or comments, I don't discriminate, please keep them in mind. You will have a chance to present them later to the panel. And now to the panel. Please remember that this isn't an interview. I would like this to be a discussion. So it's not going to be very interesting if I'm the only one asking questions and you'll be answering me one by one. So in other words, feel free to comment on each other's points and chime in and weigh in on the topics. And remember, we're all literally here to hear each other's views on the issues and to have a good discussion and have a good talk. So, all set? So let's get on with it then. We'll start off with a general introduction to the various immigration reforms and immigration policies that are to be implemented by the Finnish government. So now I'll invite Mr. Jarmo Tiukkanen from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Employment to tell us about the main points about the immigration policy of the government. And I'd like to remind people that Mr. Tiukkanen is not a politician, he's a civil servant, and as such he has not been taking these decisions, he's only implementing them as a civil servant. So, Mr. Tiukkanen, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So, I was presented already, but my name is Jarmo Tiukkanen, and like he said, first I must change this presentation because the slides of mine are not here. This one. Sorry, this. Yeah. And it's nice to be here today. And like it was said before, the consultation time is ongoing till this Friday on this proposal of 3 months unemployment rule. So you can comment on also in English and lausuntopalvelu.fi if you want. But anyway, now I was supposed to tell you something more about government program which was mentioned. So how much do I have time?
I'll give you 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Oh, for the first part.
The entire.
I have 70 slides, so there's lots of texts. I won't read those. I will just say something about those because there are lots of going on in the government program. Like how many of you have read the government program or some parts of it? Oh, luckily, that's nice. So you know what it's all about, and of course you know the government. There are 5 parties. And you maybe know how the government program is built up, there's some secret issues, maybe even I don't know, but always when the government starts to work, they make a program to what they want to have. And there's some reasoning behind these texts, but sometimes it says that there's something we must even examine more. So sometimes it's not so exact said. So, but then it's up to politicians to decide what they want to have. Okay, like was before said, these immigration issues. There are quite many issues on the paper, and started from the beginning to nationalization, all these phases. But I'm working in the ministry, and my task is to work on issues relating to working force labor market issues, third country nationals and EU nationals. So in those permanent residence permit issues and citizenship issues are in the Ministry of Interior. Of course, we do work together in these issues, but you must note this difference also. And like you know, government wants to have economic growth, and and there is something they want to keep when seeking labor force from abroad, of course, now they're focusing on EU area most in this program. And there's some special countries, 4 of them, which are specialized targeted marketing and getting those labor we need to have. But anyway, there's some good elements also, like we are making possible to work with a permit in different sectors without applying a new permit. But now I must say, I'm preparing this paper also, but now I must say that may be difficult to have much influence at the starting point. But anyway, and the new government wants to have more supervision, but also prevent abuses. And so some examples for this is that there's an income limit for residence permit for employment. This 1,600 euros per month. It's coming. It's in the parliament at the moment. And like this was mentioned before, this rejected asylum applicants, asylum seekers, they cannot change to apply for working permit. And this is passed the parliament already. It's coming into force in September. But anyway, then I checked what's happening to family reunification. Like I said, there's lots of texts and points there's only few here. And I can go so detailed or either, but like you can imagine that the definition of the family, who is the family member, they will check and maybe make amendment to law. And the person who lives in Finland and they want to have an age limit higher than nowadays, who can apply for family members to Finland, and there will be income limits more precise, and they will be determined by government decree. But for some points, this is, if we are thinking of the decision maker in the Finnish Immigration Service, they don't have any decree or law which says which is the income level must full. So this is, in that sense, it's better, I think, because then everybody knows exactly what is the limit level. But what is the level? Is it high or lower also? So that's the point, maybe. And of course, those government wants to prevent marriages of convenience and forced marriages. And something about students. No, this government wants to control also this kind of immigration, and the residence permit must be cancelled if the student uses social assistance. It's said. Something about permanent residence permit also. When studying, you have to complete a master's degree and have a sufficient knowledge of Finnish or Swedish. This language requirement is coming to permanent residence permits and more precisely the nationalization also. But what is the level? We haven't discussed this inside that there must be difference, the level, or is it a permanent residence permit or citizenship? Well, we have no decisions yet, but maybe something like that. But then also when people coming to study or doing research, the Finnish Security and Intelligence Service have to give a possibility to say an assessment of the applicant. And maybe in the future we have some sectors of studying where those residence permits are not granted. And this for studying also that the change is that the student must fulfill all costs of the tuition fees. It's getting much more higher than at the moment. And this proposal is made by the Ministry of Education and Culture, and it's also at the moment in the Parliament. Now something about processes and decision making. Like you know, Finnish Immigration Service is using automation at the moment. Or did you aware of this? Okay, but it's using because of course this all must be done according to legislation, and it's possible already in the legislation. Like you also perhaps are aware that taxation is using, and maybe some insurance companies are using automation in their tasks. But this is I must say, bigger picture of like the finance, how much money the Finnish immigration gets from the budget every year. The cost is getting down. They're getting less money every year, so that's why they. At the same time, the government program says that you have to make the decision faster and faster. There's a maximum of 1 month time limit. And in some cases even 1 week. So what is this? How this is done when there's less people making decisions, and you have to do it faster. So that's why also this automation is used. And of course, from the applicant's point of view, when automation is used, usually it means that the case is clear, it's okay, there's nothing problem also, and the decision comes faster. So I don't see, and of course if it happens to be a negative decision, of course the law says that automation cannot be used. Of course the person has to write the decision, and before the decision maker the applicant must be heard in written, given possibility to give a comment or what is going on. But again, I don't know how many times in the program is said this supervising, but this is all about that too. But of course, no, there's many elements to many different directions, but yeah, the government also wants to prevent exploitation of employees using more hard, severe punishments. But then shortly about this permanent residence and citizenship. Like I said, I don't go to details, but the government will anyway tighten the requirements for permanent residence. Now it requires 4 years, but later 6 years, and some exceptions will be there also. But here's also some elements of the language, text Swedish or Finnish, and the social security system. And this, like I said before, this is the same also when applying citizenship. In this point, what comes to language requirement and working in Finland or doing successfully by yourself, it's all about integration, which is behind this program also. Integration in Finland through work. the integration policy, like I said, it's based on these things which are mentioned, like this language, learning, work, and familiarization with Finnish society and compliance with its rules. And it means then that these immigrants have own responsibilities for integration, but there are some obligations also. I don't know, did you last week maybe the Ministry of Treasury said again that those integration funds are going to be cut more again. So it happens. So it may be things should. I don't know what's behind the calculations also, but anyway, your own responsibility gets more higher value in this issue. So this was the maybe quite fast. How about the 3-month rule? Now or late?
I think I'll introduce it so we can get on with the panel discussion. Thank you very much. All right, now to the main topic of our talk, which is the 3-month rule. As you might know, the Finnish government is preparing a proposal to Parliament in line with the government programme regarding the 3-month unemployment rule. So basically, a worker in Finland with a work-based residence permit would have 3 months to find a new job if their employment in Finland came to an end. So in a nutshell, if you're sacked, or if your employer goes bankrupt, or if your fixed-term job contract expires, you have 3 months to find a new job until you have to leave the country by law. This proposal has been controversial and has sparked lots of protest from the opposition parties in Parliament, the technology industry, trade unions, and various migrant organizations. Now, the Finnish government intends to propose the new rule to Parliament this autumn. It's now on a tour up for consultation from various organizations and from private citizens, and this ends on the 16th of August. And if the proposal becomes law, so if it goes through Parliament, the changes would not take effect before 2025, so this year is off limits. Mr. Youssef Zad, the Finnish startup companies employ relatively many non-Finnish workers. How will this new 3-month rule affect the startup companies in Finland? So my question is that if people are unwilling or afraid to relocate to Finland because of jobs, how will startups find the necessary people for their projects?
Yeah, so first of all, the startup companies in Finland, they employ about 22% of their workforce are something else than Finnish-born Finnish citizens. So there's quite a lot of immigrants working for the startups in Finland, and the share of immigrants is rising constantly. So this means that if we now make some new legislative changes that will make it harder to bring immigrants here in Finland or make their situation worse in Finland, this means that it will become a much bigger problem in the future because the share of immigrants is rising in the workforce of startups. And then the other question is, at least what we have discussed with our member companies, is that for them it really doesn't matter where they open the offices, so they can bring their business outside of Finland. Basically what will happen is that if Finland makes it hard to bring more immigrants here, it means that they will just hire these people outside of Finland. And we have a couple of anecdotal evidences about this, so I can't say any company names, but there was a large techno company bought a Finnish startup company, and they opened R&D centers here in Finland and also in another country. And during the time frame, I think it was 5 to 7 years or so, the size of the R&D center in Finland grew by, let's say, 1.5 times. And the R&D center in this other country, which I can't say what's the name of the country, but it increased, I believe it was 3 to 3.5 times the size. So, and all of the job openings, they were always open in both of these offices, so the worker can choose where he can work if he wants to come to Finland or somewhere else. And this is what we are seeing in the startup company. So they can grow somewhere else, they can bring their business, it doesn't matter where they are. So, yeah, quite a long explanation, but those are my points about that.
Excellent, thank you. Would the rest of the panel like to comment?
Can I invite Kevin to come back to this?
Oh, yes, of course.
It would be nice to see the slide that Jarmo had that has a 3-month rule
Yes.
summary there. So people
I have
know.
a question.
Should we let Jarmo maybe quickly?
Yeah,
present
sure,
A
yeah.
few facets, because I can comment on those. Yes.
I want to watch.
We can do it quickly, I think.
Yeah, I have only 4 slides in this case. But anyway, this 3 or 6 months unemployment rule. First must be noted that there's a background, okay, there's this government program, which was, the wording was quite harsh last year's summer. I wasn't in the country, I didn't see, I saw it in the autumn, but anyway, it was like you have to leave immediately if your work is over. The wording was like that. But luckily we have an EU legislation now here, because you understand that when there is an EU legislation we have to implement it, at least the way it's written in the directive. And in this case, now the wording is that the permit is not cancelled if there is unemployment. So it's not cancelled means that the permit must be valid that time. So this doesn't mean that we give you a new permit for 3 months or 6 months. It means that you have to have the residence permit valid at least 3 months or 6 months. If it's less, then the time to seek new job is that less than 3 or 6 months. That's the idea in this case. And like I said, it's based concerns or applied to work-based residence permits only. So those permanent residence permits, family members and EU citizens and students and researchers, no. And about the students and researchers, they have different legislation, also based on directive, EU legislation, and it means when they have graduated or ended research work, if they don't have, at that point, they don't have job or working place, they can apply a permit to seek new work or start entrepreneurship. And that permit can be granted for 2 years, and it can be applied within 5 years after this permit ended. So they don't need like this rule, but of course if this 5 years time is no longer exist, then later when they get the permit based on working, in that case they might come also to this rule. So, like I said, and like was said, the sort of basic time is this 3 months, but then there is exceptions for some groups with 6 months. And actually, we have this rule also already in the legislation concerning EU blue card experts. At the moment, it's 3, and after 2 years, it's 6 months. So, and the directive is only that the main rule is 3 months, and after 2 years it's 6 months. That's the directive, and all the rest in this paper here is decided by politicians. And okay, then of course there was this lots of talks in media and public talks about last autumn, and anyway before anything happened. But then I must say that the last point is on this slide, that if the unemployment is longer than 3 months, then it makes possible for Finnish Immigrant Service to check does the immigrant have sufficient resources to maintain themselves. So I don't know yet how does this work, and is it possible to ask or not, because like I said, it's not ready yet, this legislation. But this is in the directive we wouldn't have the need to take this, but it was a political decision to make it here. So this is what's on the paper now. But like I said, we like in directive also, which is done by the proposal for directive is done by the Commission, European Commission, and they have had the same rule in the paper. And like I said, in different directive also, this EU blue card also experts. So, and the idea of the Commission was, it's thinking more like, not it's more like a safety of the worker who has lost the work, so there cannot be started a process to cancel the permit unless you have possibility to find a new job and start living with the permit. That's the idea. So if unemployment happens, it doesn't mean automatically that the permit is cancelled. As like I said before, of course, we have to follow the administration processes. If the process starts to cancel the permit, we have to hear the applicant, the person, and ask, is there any other reasons for permit than work, for instance? So it takes time then, and of course when the decision is made, you can appeal if you feel so. That's your right, of course. And yeah, again, this automation, which Finnish Immigration Service is developing, it said also in the government program that they must do more automation in the processes. Well, like I said, the process is faster, smoother, but also of this supervision side. But in a sense, of course, now when this employment is over, the employer have to inform Finnish Immigrant Service. So that will be the rule also. But of course, by this we also need get more information on immigrants working, where they work, how long they are working, what's the reason for sacking, and so on. But then, of course, we have sort of a so-called talent boost program. I don't know, have you heard of it? No, you can resonate with the talents maybe there, but there are all sorts of level of talents in work life, like nurses and so on. But anyway, there's the idea that we want to have workers in Finland, we want to have smooth services for them and want to keep them here. But anyway, this is also, but the keeping those here, it's not up to government or state. Also the employers must change attitudes and do more to keep their foreign workers. That's for sure. But like I said, this is based on directive, EU legislation. We are implementing this part of the directive now, but we don't yet know much about other member states how they will do. So it's 2 years time when this must be done. So later we get more information. But like I said, you can comment on until Friday this proposal. I haven't read the comments yet, but I always get the email notice when someone has commented. I checked maybe two weeks ago, there was 5 or 6 comments, and of course I understand what's inside the comment. There's no people are not happy with it, but I hope people understand that now we need to do this when it's about the directive anyway. But of course, when we are not talking about directives are always minimum directives. You can give better protection if politically is decided so. So this is the context of the regulations. So maybe this was the point. Thanks.
Yes, excellent. Thank you again. So now for our panel, does anyone have anything to comment on it? Yes, Dr. Ndomo, go ahead.
Do I? Yeah, it's working. So maybe I would just make a comment continuing with what Youssef said, and then maybe a question or maybe a comment on your presentation. So what I was hearing about, for example, startup companies not necessarily having to be at a place that is not good for their business. If it's not good, then they can move elsewhere. But then now I'm thinking of the sectors that cannot move and the people who work in those sectors. I'm thinking of the person that drives the bus or drives the train. I'm thinking of the one that takes care of the elderly in the care home. The majority of them, of course, it's the number of migrants in Finland is still very, very small compared to other places, but it's a good number of migrants work in these sectors. Majority of them are in these sectors. And this leads me to the point that I want to get to, and I'm hoping that we all can start looking at the changes that we're discussing today at a holistic point of view. Like, look at the whole mosaic, not just one point. And I think that weakening of the working class's solidarity or togetherness. And it's not just to end there by weakening the working class and trying to divide the working class, but dividing the working class is also just another way to weaken union representation, consensus, what has been the core of how the Finnish labour market has been regulated for a long period of time. And when that succeeds, yes, for now you're going to have migrants working in care taking the hit, but it won't stop there. And so if, for example, yes, sure, the startups will go away, but there's also a part of, for example, the IT industry that might need to be here. And it only will take a matter of time. And in 10 years down the line, when you do not have 70% union membership in Finland, and we don't have that anymore. And when we get to the point where collectively bargained agreements are not universally applied because the union is not strong enough, when the union is having negotiations with the government and the employers, then these challenges become everyone's challenge in the workforce. So I wanted to point that out. And when you were talking about it won't affect student migrants or it won't affect these other migrants, I also want to take issue with that, and I hope that you notice that we should take issue with the division of migrants. Migrants are already divided, but the more you're divided, and sometimes it's more nuanced than it seems. When, for example, you say that this 3-month unemployment rule won't apply to a student migrant, because the student migrant, when they finish their studies, they can apply for a 2-year permit to look for work. It doesn't work very well in practice. When I finished my master's degree, and this did happen to me, I applied, at that time I think it was 6 months or a year, for a permit to look for work. And then I did get work. I had to apply now for a permit based on the work that I got, which was for 5 months. At the end of that 5-month job, then I would have needed to apply for another. So now, take the time the 5-month job ended in this current climate. I will be needing to apply for another permit or find a job. It gets complicated. It's easier when it's being talked about as it is written. But in practice, a student, a person who is on the working permit, a person who has been through the asylum process, became a refugee, there are moments when we become entangled because the labor market, as was said, is the primary pathway to integration. I could say more, but that would be unfair. So.
Yes, Mr. Hassan, go ahead.
Yes, if I might go on in the point that you left it, and kind of like these government policies, these proposals, especially about the immigration policies, we haven't seen yet an assessment when you take them together, because we have the immigration 3 months rule unemployment, 3 months unemployment rule, I'm sorry for that. But when we take that in consideration together with a longer period of time required to get a passport, a citizenship, a Finnish citizenship, when you get that into consideration with the fact that you're gonna introduce a Finnish language requirement or Swedish language requirement to get a permanent residence permit. So what that tells us in practice, because I speak about from practice, is that someone that works in construction, that works in cleaning, works as nurses all day at work, working longer hours, they will need to live with the fear that if they get unemployed, they have only this short period of time to find an employment. But this is not only 4 or 5 years, because the truth is they can get a permanent residence permit only when they will have Finnish language. But to learn that language, they may require way longer time than that. We all know it is not an easy language when you have, I myself have went through the integration course. It's a full-time 9 months, and still my level is quite weak. But people that work, they don't have the opportunity to learn the language. They don't have integration courses. Workplaces do not offer, usually, courses in Finnish. So by assessing all these policies together, we are kind of like, let's call it a spade, is that like this government doesn't want us here, doesn't want us that we are already here, and is telling to the people that are thinking to move to Finland that, hey, you are not welcome in Finland. Even when you check the website that maybe people from the ministry have prepared, the first thing is there, are the immigrants still welcomed here? So why do we even need to make that question? Because we have this program that doesn't welcome immigrants.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Mrs. Akame Reisa now, go ahead. Achame. My bad.
No worries. Also when it says students are not included in this, well, I was a student, but now I'm working, so it's not like we will stay students forever, and we are now already in the working force, and a lot of African students. I'm coming from coordinating a mentorship program, and mostly we are mentoring people of African descent so that they actually get a job in their field of education. But now they're working as cleaners and in the service sector, including me. That's how I have 2 master's degrees in Finland, but I wasn't able to find a job. I had to do many internships for free. So there's this imbalance of, okay, when are they're entering the workforce by working at the same time, and then by being networking with people. That's what we're providing for them. There's language barrier, there's discrimination, obviously. So they're trying to go through all that hurdle and then finding a job in their education and in their field. But when we say this 3-6-month rule, I mean, this is basically kicking everybody out. And also somehow lowering the responsibility of companies. Internships. How many internships have you done before you get a job? For free. So if we do not, make it illegal then. If you want people to be employed and to actually, join the workforce in their field, you cannot expect them to do so many internships before they actually get a job, and at the same time create this kind of rule. And my last point would be a question. How long does it take for a Finnish person to get a job after they're fired from their job? The average. Is it going to take 3 or 6 months? It's not, unless very few fields. So why is this requirement to immigrants when it's even harder for us to get a job? That I don't understand at all.
Thank you. I happen to have the answer right here in my notes, and it's on average it's 28 weeks, which is about 7 months, just over the 6-month threshold. That sounds quite nonsensical to me. Another point that sounds quite nonsensical is that after a long day at a workplace, be it on a construction site or at giving care or working in nursing or at an office, when a person comes home and they're quite tired, comes home to their family, and then they have to learn all this migration bureaucracy and law, which sounds quite complicated even to my ears, and I'm quite well versed in governmentology in Finland. This combined with the government's intention to balance the books of Finland and to slash government expenditure, which means letting many civil servants go, which weakens the possibilities of migrants to get support into integrating and actually comprehending these all rules. This sounds like a very dangerous combination to me. What does the panel think? The panel has not. Dr. Soni, do you have a thought?
I was going to comment a bit about the overall intention of this, because I think it's very problematic for both people who are coming from outside Finland to attract them to come and move and with their families and spouses, or as students, to the ones who actually are here already as contributors to the workforce and are now being penalized in this very kind of obscure way. I know as a faculty member and the students that I have, what they go through after they finish. They come to me and they say, hey, can you help me, refer me to potential employers. It takes months for them to make connections. They go through multiple internships for free most of the time. It takes 6 to 9 months for many of them to get a really good job that values their skills. And these students have come with extraordinary backgrounds from other countries and have sometimes sacrificed a lot to get to a very good educational stage. And we're letting them go. We're telling them you're not welcome here. And we're letting them go to other EU countries, other person. And the Finnish government has invested in these students. So it's really, really kind of ironic that would happen. But even if you look at faculty members like myself who came here from abroad, I came from New York at the time with a partner. She had a terrible time trying to find a job, and she left. And she said, this is not working for me. And there was no support in making that possible. And I fear for many of us who are making big commitments to move to this country, these policies are essentially pushing us away. And they're not good for the startup scene, for the specialists, but they're not good for families who are here working on all kinds of fields. A couple of things I want to say is also about this issue of residence permits allowed only within the same field of work. And this creates an issue of lack of mobility. So if you're trained in one field, but then you want to move to another field, and now you have to apply for a permit in a new field, this mobility is absolutely necessary for somebody who wants to move from nursing to say data science or something of that sort. So we can't hold our qualified migrants here hostage to something they started working on and then they can't switch fields into. And the other thing is why are we making this stratification between specialists and non-specialists? How do we define specialists? Who defines specialists? We're all specialists in something. I could be a specialist in philosophy. I'm a specialist in anything. And this stratification is very problematic because it treats migrants as an economic resource that only certain migrants have and not others who bring socio-cultural, lots of other facets that are vibrant to a country. So this is something that's very, very problematic, and we have to really push back against it. And also there's something about a third country national that is mentioned in these rulings. So again, we have a stratification in first country, second country, third countries. So it's very clear that the government is implementing a political agenda here rather than a fair kind of legislative agenda which comes with actual analyses of its economic impacts. And this is where they need to work with industry, they need to work with public sectors, academia to come up with a much more sensible program, which is not what's in here right now.
Thank you. Mr. Hasanai and then Dr. Ndom.
Yes, to kind of go first from the political side and after to answer to your question. So yes, it is a political choice. It is a political choice. What funds do we cut? Is where do we invest more? And the truth is that from what we learned a few days ago, there will be cuts in the integration and towards the help for the immigrants. And if you see the studies, a recent study that I have checked is that in the Nordic countries, we often speak about going the same level with other Nordic countries. But the study has shown that in Denmark, Sweden, Norway, when the governments and the countries have invested in the integration processes, when the integration process have went for a longer period of time, that have been more successful, both in short time and in a longer kind of like longer period of time, about hiring and about successfully integrating in the society. Denmark, on the other side, is one of those countries that from the beginning has been quite harsh with their integration policies, with their immigration policies, and they tried in there to kind of like push people to go as soon as possible to work. But that showed that both in a short period of time and in the longer run failed, because the percentage of people finding full-time employment was way lower than Swedish model and Norwegian model that offers a longer protection and longer help with the integration process and more funds towards these processes.
Thank you. Dr. Ndomo.
I was just going to say that somebody had their hand there, and I'm not sure how we wanted to deal with that.
Yeah, Q&A is going to be after the panel part of this discussion, but please raise your hand when the Q&A is about to begin, so I'll know. Right, Mr. Zahn.
Yeah, so I also wanted to point out a few numbers. You said that also in Finland, the unemployment spells on average they last for 28 weeks, right, or something. Yeah, and also in the proposal, the Economic Research Center of the government, so what they actually checked the numbers. What's the exact number in the immigrant population, and it also seems that over half in 2020 of the unemployment spells, or the spells that they did something other than work. It wasn't exactly sure if it was unemployment or what, but over half of the people who were studied, their unemployment spells or spells not working was longer than three months. So what I think is really problematic, that in the future, what will happen to these people? So will they just get kicked out, or is there more incentive to find work and somehow they just manage it? I'm not sure, but the thing is that if these people would get kicked out, that means that the supply of labor in Finland would drop. And if we're talking about business, if we're talking about economy, okay, yes, I also tend to look at the immigration population somewhere as an economic resource. I understand that there's a lot of other things, but due to my work, because I'm an economist, I follow graphs and numbers and stuff like this, so yeah, I tend to think like this. So the supply of labor would drop, not dramatically, but in some sense it would drop in Finland. This means that the companies or public sector don't have so much to choose from. And when we ask about companies, so Etla, another economic research center in Finland, they did a survey for big companies, and they asked what are the most important factors of you choosing where to invest. So where to open new R&D centers, new offices, where to grow your company. And I think so if we rank all the stuff that they said, the most important thing was the supply of labor. And for example, if we look at Sweden, if we look at some other countries who have succeeded, for example, Canada, who have managed to really suck in a lot of immigrant population. So there is a place where your company can invest, where your company can bring more workers and bring more prosperity to the nation. So what I'm really worried about is that if we are looking to make some or balance the governmental budget, and now we kind of let go of some of the workers that we really need in Finland. So what is going to happen to the possibilities of making invests in the future? And if we look at the government budget for after the year 2008, there hasn't been a single year of not the opposite of budget deficit. So what's the exactly surplus? Exactly. Yeah. So we haven't had a surplus budget after 2008, and now we just want to balance it by making cuts. But we actually should think on how to grow the productivity in our economy, how to make companies invest here and have the possibility for people to work. And this is the only way we can, in my opinion, we can reach surplus, because the cuts that need to be made would be so huge that we would have to cut like whole sectors of the government. It doesn't, we cannot just make this, juustoilla, little from everywhere. That just the cuts that could be made there, they are not enough. They're not going to be enough. So the only possibility to look at this is how to grow, how to bring more employers, more businesses, and so on.
Right, thank you. Dr. Ndolo.
I'm not necessarily to try to answer directly what you said, but when you asked about the approach, at least the economic approach, at least I think I see austerity as being the way, and one of the implications of that is usually that the most vulnerable suffer a whole lot, but the system manages to continue. But I wanted to make a comment about what happens if with this 3-month rule. If then somebody gets a good number of people then get unemployed, then what happens? And for me, I think of it as a much more complicated picture. First, because there's a group of migrant workers who would never have the luxury of being able to leave a job. And they're also in jobs where them being fired is quite an unlikely thing to happen. It's very rare for somebody to be fired from their cleaning job or from their newspaper delivery job. The norm usually is that they would leave that job if they want to look for something better. In this case, that demand of you cannot be unemployed for 3 months just makes it so that when I get tired of my postie job, I can't leave it because I do not have an option. And it also creates, on the other side, the employers are now required that they should inform Migri if you've been let go of your work or if your work relationship has ended. The danger of that is that the employer now has something that they can use against workers. And it won't be that then the employer has to fire you, but the employer can just make your life really bad that you will fire yourself. And there are 2 ways that I think this happens. The employer can make your life really bad, that you fire yourself if you're the kind of person who feels that you have a choice. Let's understand that in the migrant group, there are people who, whether we like it or not, they don't feel that they have a choice. Because going back to your home country may not be an option for you from where you stand and how you look at it. And we just have to respect that it will be so for a good number of people. And the proof in that is that you have people who have PhDs cleaning in Finland. It's not because I think it's fun, but it's because they've probably looked at their options and they've decided that this is my best bet and I'll continue doing this. And I've said this before, but I think that there's even a level of arrogance in the kind of policies that the government is making, because they do know these facts. They know that I can put you through the ringer, you're not going anywhere. So let's take that and know that. And just to dial it up a little bit and something to worry about. In Italy, in the south of Italy, we know of how bad migration can get when people's lives depend on the employer and the employer giving them the opportunity to be in that country. We may not imagine that such a thing can happen in Finland, but it can happen, and it starts like this. It might be a very distant picture that we don't think that it can happen. I don't know if you've looked at the news once in a while and have seen these bizarre exploitative things happening. I don't know if it's in Turku. Where do you have the most greenhouse plant for producing tomatoes? Exploitation of migrant workers has happened in that context. Exploitation of migrant workers happens in Finland, in the restaurant industry, to scales that you would not believe because it is not recorded. There are people in Finland who earn 4 euros an hour. There are people in Finland in the construction industry who earn wages that you would not believe it can happen. But it does happen. And now it happens sporadically. It's not the norm. But once employers have the arrogance of knowing that your existence depends on that job, then it will be easy to put you through these things, and you will not say no to it. You will keep going back to that job over and over again. I had another point which now I forgot.
Right, Mr. Saad.
Yeah, I wanted to make one about like how employers treat their workers. So before I came to my current work, I used to work for a labor union in Finland, and we had this goal that it should be a criminal offense if you, for example, pay not as much as you're supposed to pay. For example, if you have
wage theft.
Sorry?
Wage theft.
Exactly. Yeah, it should be a criminal offense, and I mean, if you get busted on doing that, and the kind of the stakes are high, then probably you would do it less. So yeah, it should be a criminal offense in Finland.
Can I say one last thing? That thought that I had.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
That's
all right.
all right.
Okay. So again, we've had this period of unions really trying to do something by all kinds of solidaristic actions. The logic behind it was that, okay, and I think that the government also plays a very long game by weakening the unions in Finland. Again, it has been the norm, and so we might take for granted the role that unions do in sustaining the Finnish labor market regulation at the state that it has been. And when we are talking about these really exploitative working conditions, it becomes also possible when there is no union to hold employers and the government accountable when the period for negotiating terms and conditions happens. And as the unions get weakened, the unions in Finland are getting weaker. And it is part and parcel of this government program to weaken the unions. And the other way to weaken the union is to rock the working class, because that's where the power of the union, of the trade unions, come from. So look at these things not as two parallel lines, but these are lines that meet at a very effective point. So let's keep that at the back of our minds.
Thank you. This discussion reminds me of a quote by late British parliamentarian Tony Benn, who once said, it's very instructive to look at the way a government treats refugees, because that's how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. Mr. Hasanai, you had a point.
If I can add.
Yes, of course.
Because truth is that immigrants' rights and workers' rights are something that tie with each other quite a lot, and it's something that I've been vocal, especially in construction industry, but even in other industries. And we should take in consideration this legislation, the 3 months rule, the other immigration policies together with the legislation that is proposed about the workers' rights. One of them, the worst, but there are many that are quite bad actually, is the fact that it is proposed that a company or employer can fire an employee just with a reasonable reason. So when you combine this with the 3 months rule and with the obligation to notify Migri in the moment that the employment relationship finishes, we will have these immigrants that will be in a situation that they will need to follow whatever kind of command, or whatever, they will lower their threshold to negotiation and everything, just to keep going with their in their workplace. And the truth is that the legislation, it is kind of like the compass that guides a nation in its path, and the path that this government has taken is the path of discrimination, of isolation, and of xenophobia, because it is building a layered system in the immigrant community and between immigrants and Finns.
Thank you. I think it's now time to move on to the next part of our discussion, which is the automated decision-making, or ADM. As was discussed before, the Finnish Immigration Service, or Migri, has implemented a system of automated decision-making when processing certain applications. So at the moment, migrants can get an automated decision from Migri when applying for a first-time residence permit for studies, when renewing residence permit cards and residence cards, and when applying for citizenship of Finland. Dr. Soni, you're a researcher of artificial intelligence, or AI. Can you please elaborate on this theme and tell us what the benefits and potential risks concerning automated decision-making are in immigration in particular?
Yes, just on a broad level. On a broad level, I will say that ADM and automated decision-making has been used in many different contexts, public sector, private sector, for helpful applications where you have mortgages, credit card applications, and so on. And you could say that they have many important benefits of expediting applications where you don't have enough staff to take care of things, and they might also bring some ability to have accountability and making sure it's being done correctly. So there's no argument to say some aspects of automated decision-making shouldn't be used in some kinds of operational processes. The challenge is when you're talking about very high-risk domains. Migration, or dealing with migrants, is a very high-risk domain, where asylum cases, citizenship cases, and residency cases could jeopardize their legal status and could jeopardize their livelihoods. In a high-risk case, the EU has implemented something called the AI Act. The AI Act, which is now coming into force, requires that any high-risk application of AI, which ADM is actually a part of, would need to ensure that it has very good accountability, auditability, transparency, explainability, and so on and so forth. So I think the Finnish public sector is going to have to be very, very careful in implementing ADM for these kinds of things. Now, the proposal that they've made, and in fact what has been introduced in April and May of this year for residence permit applications and citizenship applications, are very simplistic rule-based systems. These are rules crafted by civil servants that they use generally in processing claims. These are not necessarily complicated claims, they're simplistic claims, and they are meant to expedite those. Now, however, you still need to ensure that according to the AI Act, you have to ensure transparency, explainability, accountability of these. Even a rule-based system, how does it do that? And so if I submit a case, I need to be able to see what was done, what rules were applied, and for it to explain in common language to me why my case was denied, and so forth and so forth. So we don't have enough understanding of how these systems are currently functioning and whether they comply with the AI Act in the future. The other important thing to stress is that human expertise and experience, bureaucrats actually have decades of experience in dealing with their clients, with their customers, and they bring a ton of empathy in looking at edge cases and figuring out whether this person maybe needs some additional help and understanding what their situation might be in a gray zone, and helping them figure out how to deal with their claims correctly. So when we replace those bureaucrats, civil servants, purely with ADM, and in fact, according to new Finnish legislation, you can't even ask for who made the decision for you anymore by name. So you have very little recourse. You become essentially a statistic to the system about getting approved or unapproved. So we have to be very careful about how ADM is applied. And we have to have full accountability in civil society for that. So this is part of the challenge.
Thank you. You mentioned the AI Act, which was approved by the European Union, and that is an act, not a directive, so it's an asetus, not a directiivi. And Mr. Tiukkanen can help me with this. An act has to be implemented in full by the member states, whereas a directive is optional in part. Am I correct in this?
So the Act has provisions, but every member state then has to come up with a compliance framework to deal with those provisions.
All right.
So that's what's happening right now, is the compliance framework is being set up by every member state.
Right.
But it has to be in harmony with all member states.
Thanks. Does the panel have any comments on the ADM? If not, yes, Mr. Tiukkanen.
I can repeat myself, maybe. Like, you know, the governmental budget things, like there's less money for, even for our ministry, there's less money. We are sacking people, maybe. No, sorry, I take back. But we have human resource planning in the ministry also to manage to deal with less money. But anyway, concerning the Finnish immigration service, they have the same situation. They get every year less and less money, so they cannot keep the same personnel they have now, and that's why the ADM is helping also. But I must say, like this was said about this residence permit system legislation, if I may continue. Yeah, now I understand that now in government program there is lots of different issues on these immigrant issues context, and you cannot get the whole picture because now those are separate issues. They are prepared separately. When I'm writing this 3 months rule, I don't have any idea what does it affect to permanent permit because it's not done yet. It comes later, and I know that when we go to Parliament, I can hear a comment. Why you bring so many different proposals to us? Why not only one common proposal? And now I must remind you that last government, there was a planning. It was done 2 years or more. I was also included in this group of planning the Aliens Act, totally new one, from starting from zero and start writing it from the beginning. And that was the hope to do it this government time, but now we see the result in the program that there are plenty different kind of writings, so it didn't happen. And yeah, the ADM is needed, and maybe also that, of course, when making like I said, when making a negative decision, then it's out of question, this ADM, because you have to make a reasoning on the decision, and then the applicant must understand why it is negative, the decision. When it's positive, I have worked in past history, long time ago, in the Finnish immigration service, and one of the most simplest applications are the students' applications, and it was at that time also quite boring to make the decisions positive. Only few things to check and it's done. So why the human resources are used in that cases? So that's maybe all.
Just to tack on, yes. with ADM, it can be used also for surveillance, enforcement, and retroactive assessment. So as has been proposed, actually, the students themselves, their residence permits are now retrospectively being examined using ADM to figure out whether they should still qualify for continued residency or not. And this creates, and surveillance creates a sense of fear among everybody, that a system can simply be tracking my records all the time and make a decision about my stay in this country. Why are we doing this to a vibrant workforce? And I think this is this is a political decision that's being implemented into ADM. When I talk about AI, I talk about AI systems as being socio-technical systems and political systems. They're not just an algorithm. They're an algorithm with values that are implemented by a political system. So we should recognize that any ADM system is actually implementing those political values. And we have to be very careful about how they enter into society.
Thank you. Mr. Zad.
Yeah, so I had one point that actually ties, I think, two of the topics together that we have been talking about. So first of all, I want to start it by saying that there was an interesting survey. It was done, once again, to the startup sector. And the survey asked about companies, startup companies in Europe and in USA. What are the biggest challenges for you to grow your businesses? And you startup said actually that the ever increasing regulation is going to be a problem, and the US startup said that they are mostly worried about how the global economic system will work and what are the dynamics in the global economy. So to get back on the point, you startup said that the regulation is a problem. So now with the 3 months rule, there is it states that the employers who fire immigrant workers, they have to notify Migri. And now we have this automatic decision making in some other fields that is being implemented. So I was always wondering that when we have a lot, I mean the government bodies, they have access to a lot of very interesting registry data which can be used in various different forms, mostly for studying. But also, for example, from the income registry, you can get information about people's salaries, you can get information from Kela about everything. So why actually the employers need to notify Migri? Maybe this is also a question for Jarmo, that I mean, if we're looking to save time for the people who are working in the government, so why Migri just like take the information automatically from somewhere and then like notify an immigrant that, yeah, we have seen that you haven't maybe been working, so can you maybe clarify what's going on?
Thank you. Mr. Hasanai first, and then Mr. Tiukkanen.
Yes, I actually, maybe I answer your point, but actually Migri have implemented post-decision monitoring, automated monitoring. So what this means is that automatically right now Migri checks the income register, checks DVV, checks the student register and many other registers. And at the moment it was like they are checking the entrepreneurs, the specialists and the students. And with what I understand is that they plan to implement this even in the other residence permits, because this has been expanding with time and time again. So yes, that is a really good point actually, like why do we need to give this power to the employers to keep on top of the head of their workers? Meanwhile, Migri on the other side is having this system that they're automatically checking every month, and to be honest, they don't have that much transparency about it either. So they're like the same system about the same thing, but we're implementing both.
Right, Mr. Tiukkanen, do you want to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, that's very right. Also, Finnish Immigration Office, also other authorities get information from different systems, not only Finnish Migri, but yes, income register, DVV, etc., etc. And these are run in the ADM, of course. Sorry, maybe, but it makes, of course, this supervision more efficient. But because state has the right to based on constitution, to enact on immigration issues. But of course, we are also, as Finnish nationals, checked by registers. So some official authorities get from Kela and whatever registers information. But yes, is the double work also, you ask? But if I remember right, in directive there is written that member states must choose which one, employer or employee, makes the notification to immigration service. That's what. And when you're thinking EU, there are very different kind of member states. They are not so advanced, maybe like we are in technically, and so on. That's why there usually is that kind of regulation.
Just wanted to clarify that from the directive, does it mean that the state cannot do this automatic checking, or where? Because like when I'm talking about regulation and new, there's always in the EU some new stuff that is coming to companies, new reporting standards, new that, and there is a lot of things, and it takes a lot of time actually, and I don't think in this case, it would be necessary to ask for the companies, yeah, can you go to the Enter Finland system and say that, okay, we fired this and this person, just like the Migri can check, okay, there's no more salary coming to this person, so maybe something has happened.
Very quick.
Yeah, I forgot to say, but when we asked the notification by the employer, what is the reason, we want to also know the reason why the person is sacked. This is also for the benefit of the worker itself, him or herself. Because, like I said, there's abuses or trafficking also, so that's why we want to know also the reason. And of course we can see how long time worked, how soon after coming to Finland this happens. Is there some employers who are not making by the rules, or what's the reason behind?
Right, very good. It's 7:12 p.m. right now, so because we started so late, I'm going to have to say that this is, if you have any thoughts or any ideas, please save them for the closing remarks. You will all have a time with the microphone later. Before we move on to the Q&A, I'd like to say that the Finnish government works by majority whip rule. The parties that get a majority of the seats in parliament form a government, which then implements its program, hallitusohjelma. Unlike, for example, the British Parliament, Finnish government MPs very rarely vote against the government. However, it has happened before. So if you have any ideas about this 3-month rule and you would like to tell your MP or your minister about this, you can contact them, you can write to them or phone them. And the proposal doesn't become law until a majority of MPs vote for it in Parliament. And before that, the legislation can be revised and altered and scrutinized in Parliament committees, so it will change inevitably, or it can be deemed as having contradictions with the Constitution of the Republic of Finland, for example. But the final legislation that comes to Parliament will probably look a bit different from what the government is now proposing. So just to keep that in mind. And if you want to influence the process, keep in touch with your MPs. Right, and now for the Q&A. Please raise your hands if you have any questions and comments to our panelists, and please specify if your question is for the entire panel, or in general, or for someone in particular. And Mr. Walters.
Can you hear? Yes. Okay, so I have a series of very quick comments that result in a question. So, as it's already been said, Finns often struggle themselves to find work within 3 or even 6 months, and immigrants obviously face more discrimination in the job market, and they may also not even know about their rights. Many immigrants have fixed-term contracts, so this kind of situation where they might have extra months won't happen for those people with fixed-term contracts, so then you start to get even more different groups forming and being divided. So we can also see from the case of trafficked and exploited Thai berry pickers that it can take decades for justice to come to exploited workers. So I agree that that should be stronger, but I don't think it's going to happen overnight. So in summary, my question is, and this could go to Mr. Tiukkanen in the first instance and then be opened up to the panel, why create this hostile environment for immigrants? We've seen it fail in the UK and just cause more division. What do you think is the value of a hostile immigration environment?
Thank you. Mr. Tiukkanen and the panel.
Well, yeah. Or I guess question. Well, you have to think it by elections. You have to vote the persons you want to be MP, and ask your friends to vote, etc. And because I guess it's vital to know people who work in the parliament, you have connections to there, you can influence a person. And because now, of course, it's always a question of interests when the program is made. And of course, it goes back to elections, who wins the elections, how the majority is formed, and so on. So I have no other answers to this.
It is a political decision.
It is,
Yeah.
mostly, yes.
Yes. Anyone can you?
Sophia probably. Sorry, can you had your
All right.
questions before?
Yeah, the question, why create this environment that looks like it's bound to fail? I actually think that perhaps it won't fail. It depends on where you're standing. If you are an immigrant and you're a person who falls in the most vulnerable group, then you see this as an obviously bad thing. But when you are a bad political party with bad intentions, racist, discriminative, and all the terminologies that fit, then this is okay and it works. And that's why I keep insisting that I don't think there's intentionality when they sit down and they think this through and they write it up. And we can talk, but I can bet you that next year, these things we are challenging, a good number of them, if not all of them, will become law. Why? Because there's the guarantee that there will be a good flow of people coming to Finland who cannot say no. You mentioned Thai berry pickers. It has happened to some before. It will continue happening to them again because people, unfortunately, in a good portion of the world, is in a very dire position and they keep moving, looking for better. And exploitation here might be a little better than exploitation in Kenya. I come from Kenya, so that's why I use Kenya in my example, based on who you are. So what is obvious is that the Finnish politicians who are leading this don't care about retaining Finland as a society that upholds very highly principles of universalism and egalitarianism. Because obviously their vision of Finland is not one where I get to breathe the same air as a white Finn. It doesn't work like that. So for me, it's not a difficult question. It's a question of maybe ask, why is Finland then becoming so discriminative and becoming so racist and becoming so, I don't know if I'm allowed to say some words, so yes, but I think it boils down to that. And why did we vote these people into power?
Thank you. The gentleman in the green shirt, next to the drapes.
Hello. Yeah, my question is also from Mr. Tiukkanen, and it's more associated with the idea of making policy. So I've studied policy in my master's degree, and you mentioned about the 3 month rule or 6 months depending on which special category. If you are a specialist with 4,000 euros, 3,000 euros, I can see that there's way too many categories of immigrants over there. But nonetheless, so in case I get fired or something, so they would be my employer will have to tell Migri that I have been fired and something needs to happen with me, which means that then Migri will have to get in touch with me. Some person will have to do it. Probably it will not be an automated decision system. But then you also said that all the budgets are being slashed. And mostly in periods of economic downturn, immigrants are the first ones to get fired, which means that Migri will have to do it for certainly a much higher number of people with a much lower workforce. So I don't understand how does it even make sense from an economic perspective when you're making such a policy, because you're slashing the very authority which is supposed to monitor the inflow or outflow of people within the country. And I know that you can just answer as a bureaucrat, because I know you didn't make those laws, you are just sort of working on them, but what's your perspective as a bureaucrat? Because I'm also empathetic towards you then, because people like you are the ones who are going to be burdened with all of this work, because your colleagues will not be there to do this work anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Tiukkanen again.
Yeah, like I said, in government program there are many issues which go different directions. Some are pro and some are maybe not so pro. And of course, and there's the fact anyway that we need to have immigration in Finland. And like I said before, we have a program where we want to get immigrants to Finland to work specific works. I mean, this that nowadays we are like it doesn't maybe see so clearly outside, but what we are doing, we are trying to also collect information more, and where is the shortages of work labor, etc., so we can focus on those workforces in abroad and how to get those to work in Finland, how to get them services and keep them here, and so on. But of course, like I said, there's different directions in different issues. And now, when we are doing these issues, we can only later see what happens. But I'm quite confident anyway with this 3 or 6 months rule, because I don't understand why would European Commission also propose this kind of rule if there's no sense. Because when they make legislation, they have an assessments from many years background. So
I mean, it could also be said that EU politics has also gone in a similar direction as Finnish politics. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, but Commission bases its decision making on data information. But now we also would like to do that, of course. But now, like I mentioned in the government program, it's written the solution in the paper. So we have to think, what's the reasoning for this? So it's not easy sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you. Mrs. Achamerais.
Yeah, I wanted to say that there's this assumption that these decisions are made logically. Human beings are not logical. You can look at the international recruitment target countries. Brazil, India, Vietnam, Philippines. What's missing? Africa. So these decisions are so connected, and in a way it's trying to, for me, eliminate people of color as much as possible. They would have also removed India and Vietnam and all the others, but they don't have a choice, so they choose brown and black, I mean, basically. So I think it answers a lot of questions when you take logic out of it, because that's not why they're making those decisions.
Thank you. Another question from the front row, please.
Yes, commenting on that money question, when Migri is getting less and less money. On the other hand, now Migri, these laws, the permits are being cut shorter, so that's more job for Migri. And that would mean, because they cannot be handled automatically, because if you get international protection or secondary protection, it has to be evaluated by a person. So that would mean that those people again continue living in uncertainty. Those asylum seekers who came as asylum seekers, once again, they already might have had very long processes in the first place, and then they are now living in uncertainty. So I find it absolutely very unfair, and it would mean longer waiting times again for those people, because there's no money. So I have a question for Mr. Tiukkanen also about the decisions on the work permits, for example, like the 3-month rule. If you get a negative decision and then you get or do you get to appeal to court, and if you appeal to court, are you allowed to stay in Finland in the waiting time or not? Because if you are able to wait here, then you get again time to look for a job. which would be great, a positive thing. But I would like to ask, do you know about this plan?
Great question. Mr. Tiukkanen.
I think it's not a plan. It's nowadays in the law that if you get a negative decision and you appeal, you can make the decision of the administration court. But usually, when the decision is made, negative decision, Migri starts process to deportation of. So, and then it depends how that goes. Can you stay and wait here? And then it's up to court decide can you wait here or not. So it's not easy process, but
there's not kind of rule that you can wait in Finland while waiting for the appeal to be handled.
Yeah, you can, but perhaps your permit is like because you don't have any permit, you cannot do much. You cannot work or so.
But you can try to find a job.
And then apply again. Yes, but before there was on different aspects on this. Like you said, if you are working here and you want to do something else, a nurse, and you are maybe more progressed in that area, you have to apply again, different permit, etc. This was one thing we were thinking last government, at the time of last government, but now, because like I said, there was the intention to make the new aliens law act, but and we were thinking that you wouldn't have to need every time apply a new permit. It would allow you to work in a sort of logical following what you were working. So, but now it's only history at the moment.
Yes, Dr. Soni.
I think what Outi is bringing up is that we're creating a burdensome system for an issue that shouldn't be elevated in this way. We're adding more effort that Migri has to make on a much more regular basis in surveilling, monitoring, looking at these negative cases, and so what is the, we know the intention of all of this. It's in the name of security and control, security control for who? For a particular segment of Finnish society that feels threatened by migrants being here, and in the pretext of that, we're creating all these additional burdensome systems of surveillance, monitoring, automated decision-making, enforcing 3-month rules, telling employers they must report for employees. At the end of the day, it's creating a whole sense of fear, anxiety, and a kind of lack of incentive for people to want to stay in this country. But if we pull back and say, what are the important principles we want to use in a new government reform, in a new government policy? What are those principles? If we start with principles that are about expanding opportunities, about creating a vibrant society, about improving our growth, and all of that, if those are the principles we use, then we would have a very different outcome. And what surprises me is that this National Coalition Party has signed up to implement the most draconian racist policies of a junior partner, which is crazy because most people who voted for the NCP believed in that they believe in economic growth, they believe in sensible policies. So we have kind of gone off track, and it's because they haven't held on to important principles that matter. So we need to make the new governments, or whoever is in government now, accountable to important principles, and that's why Helsinki Left has an important role here.
Thank you, and don't even get me started on the Swedish People's Party. You there in the blue scarf.
Hi, thank you so much for organizing this. This has been very, very interesting. So I'm a legal scholar in human rights and technology, and I really appreciate the comment from Dr. Sauni about the AI Act, because the AI Act is, in principle, focused on human rights. And so when you're dealing with human rights, you have to ask about necessity. Is it necessary to implement AI technologies? Was there anything else we could do? I think civil servants are a very valuable part of society. I hope you appreciate that. And the work they do just cannot be reduced to ticking boxes. Generally, when you apply for citizenships or anything, you create your file, and that's the first thing that you do. You can see, okay, is everything in place? And then maybe you can put a time limit on the civil servants that, okay, they apply for the files, if everything is there, maybe you can say after 4 months. If if there's no red flags, then it's approved. I know other countries do this as well, because in other areas where there's been huge applications for citizenship, I know Belgium had this Kafka system that was so hard to get citizenship, and they said, okay, in the end, we're just gonna check all the boxes at application. Civil servants have 4 months to check it. If something comes up, we can ask more questions. If nothing comes up, great, it's approved, go on. You don't need to put an AI system that involves all this extra risk on humans and also normalizes this idea of this impersonal use of technology in society. And I really also like the comments that people made about the European Union, because let's not use the European Union as a standard. There are 27 countries in it, and not all of them are even as progressive as Finland, and we're not saying holding Finland in a progressive light here. If it's 3 months to find another job, that can be perhaps acceptable in a very big economy like Germany, but in Finland, obviously, that's difficult. You can allow for more time. You don't have to lower your standards, you can raise them. And this is what we need to do. We need to allow for more humanity in how we're approaching this, and not just say, let's go to the lowest common denominator and normalize, automated decision-making for these things. And so I think we really need to question it, especially when the government says that they want to do this because they want to prevent exploitation on the market. Well, how is this going to happen? This is not particularly a question, it's a comment, but if you want to go on to it, please do. And
thank you very much. AI was supposed to do the boring work for creative people, but now it's doing all the creative work on behalf of the boring people. So I find it with that quite sad. Next question from you in the black shirt.
Thanks. I've been following the immigration topic for over 20 years, so I would have a lot of things to say on everything we've said here tonight. I'm just going to go back to the 3-month question and put it in context. So bear in mind that in Finland, the law doesn't specify if and when they would cancel someone's residence permit in such a precise way. Basically, it's up to Migri if and when someone tells them, or if they notice something in some registry, are we going to react on it or not? Most of the time, they don't have time to even notice. However, the thing is, as soon as they are told that there's some change somewhere, they are quick to cancel. So I have to agree with Tim, which basically prepared that part of the legislation, that basically by implementing the minimum imposed by EU, that 3 months is an improvement, because now they at least have to give you 3 months. And I'm going to put this compare this to the earlier law change that happened in Finland. I don't know if you were already in UVI back then. Were you in UVI? Yeah, so you probably remember that one. So until 2004, the law did not say what Migri's predecessor, UVI, was to be doing with your passport when you applied for residence permit. So the common practice at the police station was to keep your passports during the whole time they process your request, which can be anything between 6 months or over a year in some cases. So suddenly it required a very explicit change in the law in 2004 that said that from now on the police and the authorities cannot take your passport away, they can only check it to make sure that it complies and that they have all the info they need, and they have to give it back to you. That was an explicit change in the law. So that 3 months is an explicit obligation on Finland to at least give you 3 months. It's a plus. And it's important to keep it in that perspective. Now, as to whether 3 months is enough, again, Finland is very keen on implementing EU directives in the most restrictive way, and it's not just in immigration matters. If an EU directive is supposed to improve people's life, Finland drags its feet. If an EU directive is supposed to complicate people's life or restrict their rights, Finland is always very eager to implement it. So the 3 months is the bare minimum that EU wants, and Finland goes, oh fuck, okay, I guess we at least have to do 3 months. What would be the ideal solution, which is where I think, I'm going to throw the ball to Jarmo on this one, hopefully you can bring it to the right people, What should be the ground rule? It should be twice the average for locals for the country concerned. In Finland, for Finns, it's currently on average 27 weeks. I have different data, by the way. It's between 27 weeks to up to 2 years. It depends on which sector. But basically, if it would be twice the average for Finns, in principle, it gives a bit more leeway to foreigners. It's a good average enough. The only problem is that you would have to update this in real time, and that's legislative, as far as legislation goes, a bit tricky. Then, the second point, the automation. It's actually a good thing because the Finnish approach to using automation and scripting is to quickly vet the obvious yes. It saves time. Getting back to your point, though, earlier, is what happens with the negative ones and what sort of accountability is there? And the short answer, I'm sorry to say, Jarmo, there isn't any accountability in this country. Yes, there is a box that says we have to hear the person's comments if they're getting a negative decision, but Finland is a box-checking society. It's not a compliant society. Okay, we've got your complaint that you're not happy with the decision. Okay, we're going to give you a negative decision anyway. You see it with Kela, you see it with the office, you see it with Migri. It's just a box to check. We have given you an opportunity to speak. We don't give a damn what you said, we're going to give you a no anyway. So, but it's really sad that we started late because there's many points I would have liked to comment on, but I wanted to put these two aspects in context because there's a lot of positive to it, even though the delays as far as the 3 months thing is ridiculously short.
Thank you. And then the last question from the person with the mustache, please, and then we can go to the closing remarks.
And from Tekstin Talo's behalf, if you want to continue for the extra 15 minutes that we took, then you are free to do that. We don't have the next thing happening immediately afterwards, so you can do that. Also, we had some questions in the stream chat, so without the stream, but we had some questions also from there, so I can also tell you those. So where was the question there?
Hey guys, thank you so much for the really nice discussion and very insightful. I work in selling data and AI and automation solutions, and I have my background in social and healthcare sector. Therefore, I'm not asking about the EU AI Act. I'm selling solutions for EU AI Act compliance. But then I want to ask from the point of view of, for example, practical nurses, those who are lifting the heavy weights of the society, and there's so many immigrants also working in that section. There's a lot of people who are working with 0-hour contracts. So those people, what happens if they get hurt? So they necessarily don't have an option to go work from their home office, for example, working on a laptop. So what is the fail-safe for such cases who are lifting the heavy weights?
Thank you very much. And now, time for the closing remarks, and our panelists, if they wish to,
Any questions quickly in the stream that we should just put on the table?
Yes, there are a couple of questions in the stream. I think you answered, or at least broached a few of the topics that were asked.
Lovely.
Already, there is a question, what problem is the government trying to solve with the 3 months rule?
Right, so...
there are a couple of others about the effects of how these changes will affect, for example, how it will affect family reunification for labour migrants, and also for the effect on international students who graduate from Finnish universities, and also what is the effect on those labour migrants who can't come back to their countries of origin, for example, due to the risk of prosecution, and who do not have a refugee status. So the effects on different groups of people.
Thank you. Right, so now let's head on to the closing remarks, and let's start with Mr. Hasanai. Go ahead, and just go counterclockwise.
Thank you, and I will try to answer to the questions as well. And three main points that I wanted to be vocal about today. One, the first one was the division that these proposals, not only the 3 months rule, but all of them, will bring to the Finnish society. The second one, it is the we will have even more exploitation of the workers. And the third one is the suffer that this will cause to the families of these immigrant workers that move here in Finland. I will stand a little bit shorter to the second one and after to the third one. Another important point it is that we have discussed about the law, but we haven't discussed it much about the specific. One of the specifics, it is the fact that all the workers have 3 months time, but the specialists have 6. The idea it is that in here we are creating like 2 different classes between immigrants, but when you check the numbers from Migri, is that in 2023 there have been 1,000 and something specialists moving to Finland for the first time, but there have been more than 10,000 immigrants getting residence permit based on a part decision from the Administrative Employment Office. So these are people that work in construction, in cleaning, as a nurse, and other professions that are quite necessary for our society. And the truth is, if you speak with someone that works, for example, in hospitality up north, they don't have work in the summer. If you speak with someone that works in construction during the winter, you know that if you are fired, you lose your job during the winter, you need at least 4 or 5 months to find another one if the company is willing to take you. And if you know that kind of like, if you have to deal with the HR office, you will need at least 3 months during the summer to meet them and even more to go through the interview process. So this 3 months time, even if we put everything else like aside, it is a really short time. So I was really hoping that the gentlemen here and all at the ministry will hear this out and take into consideration to kind of like put up that amount of time. 3 months is too short.
So it's 6 months.
And so it is 6 months, that is true. In my opinion, and to be honest, this is from UN, from a convent that Finland unfortunately haven't signed, as many of the Western countries. It is that it's a convent about immigrant workers and their families, and it states in there that based on this convent, the states that have ratified it should allow the immigrant workers to stay until the end of their residence permits. In my opinion, that is the perfect solution. Maybe in the cases that we need to kind of like find the middle agreement, I would agree to if it's a 1-year residence permit until the end of that residence, or if it's a 4-year one, at least 1 year, at least the minimum. And even in the EU level, the discussion it is that 3 months time is still short and they should make it at least 9 months. But we have states in there, as someone said earlier, there are 27 states, so it is not a decision from like just some data or just from a single opinion, but there are different states with different opinions, with different groups that lobby and everything. And the other part that we haven't taken into consideration at all today, and unfortunately I haven't seen the government take that much in consideration, even though I've seen many comments to the law, I understand that you haven't read them yet, is that the families will suffer from this. Because when someone moves to Finland, is the first year or is the second year, they usually bring their families with them. Are the international conventions that kind of like force this one? I don't know what this government would do if they weren't. And so you will have your partners coming with you, and you have your children that they start studying in here and start learning the language. So if we have only 3 months period of time, we'll suffer our country, we'll suffer our economy, and we'll suffer all these families and all our society. The truth is that Finland needs more immigration, immigrants needs more stability, and this policy gives none of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish with a bit of a positive paragraph. I work as a project coordinator in Think Africa for our mentorship program. We have a lot of people who are professionals in their education and who have studied a lot of them masters and PhDs and still looking to change their fields from the fields we mentioned to what they've actually studied. So if you're interested to become a mentor, don't leave with all this negative talk that we've been saying today, perhaps you can actually do something and help someone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sophia, and I also want to try and end with more positive comments, and I think we actually do have ways we should be acting. And there's a comment period that, as Jarmo indicated, for till Friday, so please go and write detailed comments that the ministry can take into account in reframing, rethinking, even if it is a very flawed legislation. These comments are important to put into the public domain and for them to address. But as we've discussed, please speak to MPs, anyone you think can influence this legislation unfolding. But we also have the right to protest. And there have been many public protests in the past 1 year, and we should make ourselves visible in these protests, specifically about these issues, and not think that this is not a burning issue for most of us. I want to highlight something that Dietmar said is about families. We work with a lot of women migrants in a research project called Trust Them that I'm working on with Sanna, who's here. And we started this research project because we recognize, according to OECD's own figures, that Finland has the highest rate of unemployed migrant women in the Nordics. Why would that be the case as a progressive society? There are many, many factors, structural factors, that make it very hard for migrant women to find work here. And especially when they come with children, and childcare is an important part of their needs, and with Finnish language and so on and so forth. So the whole project has been trying to figure out ways to allow more migrant women to get into the workforce and so on. Migrant women also may not, who are spouses, would have trouble then leaving their spouse if they knew that they couldn't find a job within 3 months. So we're making them even more vulnerable by adding these additional burdens on them. So we need to recognize that there are many people of color, women, others who are quite vulnerable, and this only makes it much worse for them. So we need to think about the principles that Finnish society wants to embody, the reasons all of us came here. We believe in principles of equity, egalitarian, of justice. If these principles are not embodied in legislations, then this is not a society that we all want to live in. So, but we are all here, we want to make the society better. So let's work on that together.
Thank you.
Right, so on a positive note, I will try to keep that. So how I see this, I think we're here because we're not just hoping to know what's problematic or what's wrong, but hopefully if something can be done, something to be done. This legislation is going to happen, but we might want to try to shape what ends up becoming a law, or what ends up becoming something that shapes the way we live forever after. And I think that I would like to encourage all of us to think of the big picture. With all that we've talked about, with all that we've had, and with all that you will keep hearing, keep in mind not one proposal, not just the 3-month rule, not just the changes to workers' rights. Take all of the government program as a whole and try to see the red thread. What is the common line? What it all leads to. I have my understanding of what that might be, and I think that it has a lot to do with division, segmentation, whatever you want to call it. You see it in the smallest ways, like right now, the division between the specialists and the other working class. Which migrants, skilled migrants, non-skilled migrants, this rhetoric of talent and whatever. Take all of that and don't take it as a mundane, useless thing. It is all important, and once you have the big picture, then it will be easier for you to understand why. It will be easier for you to answer that question somebody asked, why the 3-month rule? You might not be able to find the answer by just thinking of the 3-month rule, but you'll find the answer if you think of why this government program, the shape and form that it has. Then when you know that, then you will know exactly how to act and where to target your action. And your action might be whatever you'll be able to do now until the 16th when we can comment on this, but it doesn't stop there. It's in the next election period to make sure that you can bring about the change that will slowly start to chip away whatever problematic differences that have already been encoded into law and will continue to be encoded into law through this current government's lifetime. So my encouragement is act between now and the 16th, but act even more so after the 16th, not resting for a moment, because if you do, and we do have this government for another term, I don't think that we will have the Finland that anyone imagined Finland is. And this is something that both migrants and Finns are supposed to worry about. And a very concrete comment, if you can consider this, so that if the 3-month rule has to happen, or 6 months, or whatever, how many months it becomes, I think it's very important to pair it with labor market support. It's important to pair it with language training. It's important to pair it with different kinds of assistance that migrants can get from employers. Because it's not fair to act like the only thing you can do is tie the hands of the migrants behind their back. There is the other thing that makes more sense to do, which is equip them with what is necessary for them to be better members of the working force. So why not add that and make it actually be the forefront?
Yeah, so someone from the audience said, I think it was super interesting, like, what is the problem that the government wants to solve with the 3 months rule? It was you, so that's nice. So yeah, it was more online. But that's very interesting way to put it. And well, the obvious problem they have to solve is the directive. They have to implement the EU directive somehow. But it could have been 9 months, or it could have been 12 months. And that would have been more sensible to me, because it sounds, and according to statistics, it takes longer time to find a new job, even if you're a Finn. So, with this government, there are a lot of things on the immigration side that makes things harder, or makes it, to me it seems that it makes Finland less desirable to come to work or to arrive in this country and build your life here. And what this means for Finland, in my opinion, is that if we take all of the countries in the world, and each country has the same policies, and now Finland and maybe some other country, they make it a little bit stricter for people to come here. What that basically means that people quite possibly will go somewhere else. And now we're talking about labor migration. Do we want these people to go out somewhere else than Finland? No, we want them here because, I mean, we're talking here about the government deficit and all that. And in my opinion, it's only economic growth that can really solve the problem, because the amount of money that we're talking is so large that it just cannot be achieved without growth. And if we're thinking about growth, and well, in my case, startup companies, usually the companies, they use very similar technologies, they use very similar ways of doing business, but really the best companies are the ones who can attract the best people. And so this means that in Finland we should always think about this, how we can get the best people here, how we can get more people here, and how we can give them better possibilities to take part in labor markets. So those are my remarks.
Thank you.
Like I said in the presentations before, I'm a civil servant of this government, so I just want to, maybe I'll stand and bow to you. Thank you for the situation and listening to you two, and giving me opportunity to come to here, give you some presentation of this proposal. And I will make marks to this proposal of this occasion, so of this event. Boy is calling, so sorry. Yeah, thank you. I think that's very important to listen, whoever it is, the legislation is done for. Unfortunately, maybe some stakeholders have more power to be listened to, give their voice to be heard. So, but that's why I want to participate all occasions if possible. And the next thing, maybe, like said here also, that for you, maybe it's to give your opinion to member MPs, and you have to check who is sitting in committees in the parliament. That's the best way to give your opinion. Sorry if I can't pronounce anymore. And one thing more, when we are doing this new legislation amendments to law, of course it's now more important to have assessment maybe 2 or 3 years after the law comes into force, and then again to maybe have an assessment what to do, or do we have to change something. And maybe I add now what happens after this consultation is over this Friday. So go and give your opinions in this service. So after that we will make we put all those opinions together and see what people think of this proposal. And then of course we give it to minister and his political advisor, and they assess it, see, and then of course there's 5 parties in the government, so all of these ministers and the political advisors check this, what kind of statements has come. But then it's up to them. Yet again, these political decisions to decide how to proceed, what kind of proposal is given to Parliament later. And this will happen this autumn, in October probably. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
I just want to say that, Jarmo, I really appreciate you taking the opportunity to come here and participating in this, which is really important. And one last thing to ask, and you don't have to answer it, is the government does not allow for any kind of economic or scientific assessment of these policies. I thought in the past they would actually request those to be included in the process, but I understand lately that has not been the case anymore.
I can answer that. So when the law is in committee, the Parliament committee can invite specialists and experts to give their opinion on the legislation.
So we can actually try to use that another moment to sort of
exactly,
show evidence why this is problematic.
And one way is to write or call an MP and ask the MP on the committee to invite you to give your opinion. Yes, in Finnish.
Yeah, that's the right way also, but like when we are writing the proposal, of course we have to make an assessment in that paper. But the problem, like I said, in some cases is that we have the solution, and how we get to that solution, it's a bit difficult sometimes.
Right, so it's 8 o'clock sharp, and we're 30 minutes over time, but again, thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you very, very much for being here tonight in Tekstin Talo or watching online. Thank you all, have a nice evening, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.